What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my early thoughts ahead of the Game Week 36 deadline. So I'm going to talk about Bruyne, Salah and Ederson in a bit of detail and then go through some of my notes from the weekend as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. All right, let's start off with Kevin De Bruyne. 2 assists in the game against Nottingham Forest yesterday. 2 bonus points as well. So he finished on 11 points. And he's actually, I wouldn't say gone under the radar, but his returns over the last 4 weeks have actually been a bit better than I think a lot of people kind of realise, myself included, to be honest, because I completely forgot about the 18-pointer against Crystal Palace. So it was 11 points against Forest, 9 against Bruyne. He blanked against Luton in the 5-1 after playing 80 minutes, which wouldn't happen too often, and then 18 points against Palace. So the last 4 game weeks, he's done great. The minutes are also looking good as well. He's played 80+ in 3 of those matches. The only one where he played 71 was the Brighton game. And we know, obviously, now that Man City have got a lot of space between most of their games. Not in Game Week 37, but I'll talk about that in a second. So I really like De Bruyne at the moment. I don't think the price would completely put me off at 10.5, as long as you can basically fit everyone else in that you want in the squad. And that's kind of what I've been saying about De Bruyne for a long time now, that he's a great option, right? No one thinks different as long as he's going to get the minutes, which he is at the moment. It's just whether or not there's sacrifices you can make in your team to get him in without being detrimental to your overall score. That's all it is. Because if I wanted to get De Bruyne in for Fernandes, I'd have to find 2 million from somewhere. And there's not really too many places that I would want to do that. That's one of the reasons he's not in my team. But if you've got the money, then I think he's one of the best differentials before the end of the season. If we assume that most people making transfers now have got an eye on double Game Week 37, and you consider which attackers from those teams that are doubling are differentials, there really aren't that many. Like Man United, like Bruno Fernandes is not super high owned, but he's not super low either. Garnacho maybe, Højlund up front, but then do you really want to take a space in one of your front 3 with Højlund? Maybe. I don't mind him as a differential, but he's not better than De Bruyne. Newcastle, Isak and Gordon, super high owned, so they're not differentials. Barnes didn't start the game at the weekend. I can't remember how many minutes he got when he came on. Let me just double check here. I'll just find Newcastle for a second. Harvey Barnes, there you are. Yeah, 24 minutes. So you can't even guarantee the starts out of him like you can with Gordon. Wilson, look, if he began to get starts, he could be a massive differential. We know how good he is, and he's usually ahead of Isak on penalties as well when they're both on the pitch. But there's just no guarantee of that. So there's not really anyone from Newcastle. Man City, Haaland and Foden are obviously highly owned. De Bruyne is the differential. Chelsea, Nicholas Jackson could be an option, but Palmer's obviously super high, and there's no one else really there. Madueke and Mudryk possibly, but they feel a little bit, I don't know, underwhelming, I would say, as picks. And once other attackers start getting back to fitness, like Sterling, for example, their minutes might be cut as well. Brighton, someone said on the stream last night that they've scored something like 4 goals in the last 10 games, which is not great. I don't mind Gross or João Pedro as options. Villa at home this week. The double is Newcastle away, Chelsea home, and it's Man United at home, Game Week 38. But again, they're just very uninspiring right now. So I've probably missed out a team there. Man United, Chelsea, Man City, Brighton, Newcastle, and there's one more. Oh, Spurs, of course. There is one attacker at Spurs that could become interesting, and that is Richarlison, who I don't think it was any surprise didn't start against Arsenal, because obviously he's been out for a little while, but he did get 26 minutes. And if we see him get a start against Chelsea and against Liverpool in 36, he could be a nice differential with Burnley at home, Man City at home in the double, then Sheffield United away last game of the season. But his minutes wouldn't be fully secure either way. So in terms of differentials, if that's what you're looking for, De Bruyne is probably one of the best options right now, but he will cost you 10.5. Now, 2 other things to think about. One, will he play every single game? I think there's a pretty good chance, because the only other thing Man City have got to worry about now is FA Cup, and there's a gap after Game Week 38. But the gap between games in Game Week 37 is Saturday for the Fulham game, and then it's Tuesday for the Spurs game. So there is a chance he sees reduced minutes, but I think he'll start against Wolves, he'll start against Fulham, and if he's fit enough to start against Spurs away, he'll also start that game. And then it's Tuesday, Sunday turnaround for Game Week 38. So I think De Bruyne could start all 4, but I wouldn't necessarily put a massive amount of money on it. I still think there's a chance at some point he sees one benching over the last 4, but that's the kind of risk you take with a differential like that, and he can go and get you the returns. The other question that some people might have, if you don't own either, is whether De Bruyne is actually a better option than Foden. And again, there's a 2.2 million price difference. I'm not convinced he is, right? And Foden was only ill at the weekend, so presumably he'll be back next week. I think if you're comparing the two, Foden might actually be, especially when you take the price into account, still the better pick. I looked at their returns per minutes played, and De Bruyne is ahead, but Foden generally does get more minutes. And obviously that's what you want from an FPL pick. And if I look at their stats, right? So if I go to Fantasy Football Hub a second, De Bruyne per 90 minutes, 0.17 non-penalty expected goals, 0.5 expected assists. So 0.67 expected goal involvement, which is great, by the way. If you go to Foden, he's on 0.33 non-penalty expected goals. So his goal threat is basically double or near enough, and it's 0.23 expected assists. So his expected goal involvement is lower at 0.56 compared to 0.67 for De Bruyne. But De Bruyne is skewed way more to assists, and we know that goals are worth more. Now, on the flip side, De Bruyne is very good for bonus, and when he does get an assist, that's probably worth, 4, 5, maybe even 6 points, depending on how many goals Man City score, because of his ability to be a bonus magnet. But overall, I would probably just take the goals from Foden. So if you weren't considering differentials or anything like that, I still think with the money saved, Foden is the better pick. But it is worth saying have only got 3 game weeks left of the season. If you've got mini leagues to climb or overall rank goals that you want to hit and you don't have any differentials in your team right now, I would definitely pick De Bruyne over Foden. But who do I think is going to score the most points from now until 38? If they get similar minutes, or if they start every game, I think Foden will outscore De Bruyne. But it'll only be just, so De Bruyne could be worth the risk. All right, let's talk about another premium midfielder next. Mo Salah, who will cost you 13.5 million, and you cannot even guarantee that he's going to start games at the moment. He's missed 2 of the last 3 Premier League games. And in the past, right, Salah would get the odd bench in, and you wouldn't mind because you know that he was going to start the next one, and he'd probably get 20 to 30 minutes off the bench as well. But even that's not happening at the moment. Against West Ham, it was 11 minutes, and against Fulham, it was 16. So something's not quite right there. Obviously, at this point, most of you have probably seen what happened on the touchline between Salah and Klopp. Not great. Not the kind of thing you usually see kind of in public. Maybe that would happen behind closed doors. We don't know why that happened, what's been said. Presumably, Salah's not happy with being benched and Klopp's not happy with his attitude around it or something like that. I'm just speculating. But it's not ideal for FPL. Probably not ideal if you're a Liverpool fan either, but not ideal for FPL moving forward. Because if you own Salah, it's a massive problem. Will he start that Spurs game in game week 36? Now, for what it's worth, you would hope that Klopp and Salah, who are both probably Liverpool legends, you could say at this point, or close to, will kind of put this to bed and talk about it this week, and Salah will be back in the team. Because one reason you could see for at least one of the benchings, over the last 3 games, is that they've had a lot of matches in quick succession. They had the Atalanta game, the 2 games in 34. It was a quick turnaround to game week 35 as well. I don't think it's a shock that Salah was benched for 1 game. Maybe it's a little bit surprising that he was benched for 2 of them, though. But I think he probably will start. Unless this whole thing between him and Klopp is massive and we don't know about it, I think he probably will start against Spurs. But I also think it's fully reasonable if you want to sell him, because who needs a headache that costs that much money when there's so many other players you could go to? Like even dropping him down to De Bruyne, who's got Wolves at home, then a double game week, that's going to save you 3 million. So suddenly you've got, definitely a better option over the next 2 game weeks, and then more money to spend as well. The only thing I will say in favour of keeping Salah is if you're happy with your squad for 36 and you don't need to make too many movements until 37 when the double actually arrives, he is now a massive differential, right? I don't know exactly what his ownership was, but it's probably around 20 to 30% for last week. And that's going to drop even more because people are selling him this week, understandably so. And by Salah's kind of standards of how good he can be, that is really low ownership and something that, if you're down the ranks or stuff like that, again, if you want to climb up those mini leagues, maybe that is a risk you take for game week 36. Maybe it's not something you take for the rest of the season, but in game week 36, when it's a single game week for everyone, maybe you keep hold of him, roll that transfer, and then spend the money in game week 37 instead. I mean, will Spurs at home be a super easy fixture? No. But Spurs do give up chances. That defence is not watertight by any means. It's not as bad as, like I've said this before, it's not as bad as like Man United or someone like that. But it's not exactly fantastic either. Liverpool will get chances. It's just whether or not Salah will actually be on the pitch. So I don't think anyone should be buying him right now. I think that's pretty clear. And I think it's fair enough if you want to sell him. But he is now a huge differential. And I do think some people, maybe less so now after what happened against West Ham with the stuff with Klopp, but some people are going to want him for game week 38. There's lots of speculation that he could go in the summer. And that might be the last time you ever own him in FPL. And they've got nothing to lose in that Wolves game. Now, to be fair, you can frame those kind of things both ways. Well, they've got nothing to lose. They've got nothing to play for. Maybe it'll just be a drab affair. Or maybe, they'll just be unleashed and go absolutely massive against Wolves. You just don't know. But yeah, I've not got him. I've got no plans to buy him. So it's easy for me to say, well, you should keep hold of him. But I honestly think if the rest of the team looks good and you don't need the money this week, why not roll the transfer and just spread the money around with a -4 or whatever you want to do in game week 37 and just take the Spurs at home game. If you're adamant he's not going to start, fair enough, get rid of him. And obviously there's some doubts there. But I just think with the gap between the West Ham game and Spurs game, it's more likely that he starts than not. But I guess we need to see over this week how much more comes out. I mean, after the game, Salah hadn't calmed down because he didn't take any questions in they have like a media room, media tunnel, whatever. And he said, if I speak, there will be fire. So he's obviously still infuriated with everything that's gone on. But also that's straight after a game, right? He's got time to calm down before that Spurs game. They've got training. We'll see the pictures that come out on the Liverpool Twitter account. Hopefully Salah will be smiling for anyone that owns him. But yeah, I like him as a differential. If you want to sell him, it's absolutely fair enough at this point. So goalkeepers don't usually get too much airtime in these videos, but given that Ederson went off with an injury in the game against Nottingham Forest yesterday, and his ownership is probably a little bit higher than it normally would be because of the double game week, I think it's worth talking about him, right? So in the first half, he got hit pretty hard in his shoulder, and he was able to carry on playing, but only up until half-time, which is when they made the substitution for Ortega. So at the moment, we don't know how bad it is and how long it might keep him out for. But after the game, his arm was in a sling, not ideal, and Pep said the injury doesn't look great. And I think, although he was able to carry on playing up until half-time, a shoulder injury for a goalkeeper is not ideal, especially when you're diving around and stuff like that. So I think it is likely to keep him out for a few games, maybe for the rest of the Premier League season. Obviously, before you make any decisions on transferring him out, don't listen to me who's got no medical expertise whatsoever. Wait and see what Pep Guardiola says in his press conference. But I'm starting to think about replacements because I don't think he's going to play over the next couple of games. But let's see what happens. If you are looking to replace him, the obvious player is just to go to Ortega, who would come in for him, who's just 3.7 million. Now, it's not that exciting to just switch from one Man City goalkeeper to another. It's not what you want to be using your transfers on, but that does enable a lot of money. Ederson's 5.5 and Ortega's nearly 2 million cheaper. It's 1.8 million cheaper. That might let you make your attacking move in 37. It might give you enough money to go for De Bruyne or whoever you want to in game week 38. Like for me, it might let me do Anthony Gordon with, I think it's Brentford away last game of the season. Not a bad option, but it might let me get in Saka or Havertz or Odegaard, who've got Everton at home, where I've got no Arsenal attackers as it stands. So I quite like him as a pick. The fixtures are good. Wolves at home in 36, the double in 37, Fulham and Spurs away, as we know by now, and then West Ham at home last game of the season. The only way he doesn't play all games, Ortega, and by the way, this is assuming Ederson's out for the rest of the season, is if the league is wrapped up by game week 38. Now, I'm not going to go into all the possible combinations of how that could happen. And I think it's quite unlikely because I don't see Arsenal or Man City dropping points for now. But if the league was done by 38, there's every chance that Pep Guardiola would put Scott Carson in. He's done it before. But I think by that point, game week 37 double's gone. So if you're bench boosting, you've used it. And hopefully you've got another goalkeeper for game week 38 that's quite likely to play anyway. Basically, I don't think the possibility of Scott Carson playing in game week 38 should put you off buying Ortega. If you don't want to go to a Man City goalkeeper, or you want to, leave that slot open for a De Bruyne, Foden, whoever you don't own at the moment, then I quite like Vicario, but you wouldn't want to buy him this week because he's got Liverpool away. So hopefully you've got a different goalkeeper you could play instead. But in the double, you get Burnley at home and City at home. Now, City, very unlikely to get a clean sheet there, but possible save points. Burnley is a good chance of a clean sheet. And then you've also got Sheffield United away last day of the season. And Vicario's not going to miss any minutes. He's going to play all of those games. Forster's injured anyway. They're not going to bring in another goalkeeper. So I think with Vicario, you're pretty safe. Otherwise, it's just the other double game week goalkeepers. I wouldn't touch Brighton goalkeepers for Bruggen and Steele. Just don't go there. There's just too much risk of rotation. Onana's pretty good, but I don't see a clean sheet for Arsenal or Newcastle at home. And Petrovic, look, I've gone for him, and I think there's a good chance he plays every game. But there is still a small doubt in my mind if Sanchez can get back fit. But at the moment, he's not in full team training, so he's not really much of an issue. So Petrovic at 4.6 could be an option. And then Dubravka maybe, but I think for me, like Newcastle have got players like Gordon, Isak, Dan Burn, maybe Sheriff he's fit. I'll talk about him in a minute, who are really good options. I don't know if you need to risk Dubravka, even though he's 4.3, because Eddie Howe keeps saying that Pope's getting close. And I think if they could get him back in the 11 before the end of the season, they will. So I just probably wouldn't take the risk for Dubravka. So I think for most people, you're probably looking at Vicario if you've got the money and a spare Spurs slot, or Ortega, who's so cheap. And I do think it's quite boring just moving to Ortega, but that's almost certainly what I will do. Really quick one. Let's just assume he's out for the season. By the time you watch this video, he might be absolutely fine for game week 36. When would you sell him? Would you do it this week or wait until game week 37? I think if you're on bench boost in 37, you're going to need to make this goalkeeper swap anyway, right? So nothing's going to change that fact. And so getting Ortega for Wolves at home in game week 36 could be quite nice, just making the move this week. So let's say you've just wildcarded into Ederson and your plan was to roll 36, make one move in 37. You could just flip that around if you're absolutely sure you want Ortega. But if you've got a goalkeeper with an okay fixture this week, like Petrovic, like I have with West Ham at home, there is maybe a case to be made to wait until 37 and still roll your transfer, because something else might happen that actually changes the goalkeeper that you want, right? So it might be that you want to go for De Bruyne, or you want to go for Foden, or you know someone else gets injured and you want to take a punt on Doku or Grealish, whoever it might be, and you just go to a different goalkeeper instead. So it all depends on how kind of certain you are. But either way, I don't think it looks great for Ederson. I wouldn't be completely surprised if he misses the rest of the season, but let's wait and see what Pep says. So we'll just finish with a couple of notes from the weekend. So as I've already mentioned, Phil Foden was just ill for the game against Nottingham Forest. So presumably he'll be back for game week 36. And I think it's quite likely that he starts every single game at the moment for Man City. He's definitely in their best 11. I guess with any Man City players in that double for 37, because of the quick turnaround, there could be rotation. But I just think with the Premier League on the line still, almost certainly on the line still at that point, he will probably just play both games as long as he's fully fit. Haaland is back now. He got a total of 28 minutes against Forest, scored as well. If you don't own him, I guess it really comes down to what was your reasons for not owning him. If it was just because you didn't think he was going to start this week and you're going to bring him in later, then great, bring him in. He's almost certainly going to start in game week 36 if he's fit, and Wolves at home is a really good fixture. I think there's a good debate to be had this week about Haaland versus Saka captaincy, for example. Maybe even Salah if he's going to start. But either way, I think Haaland does look like a great option, right, for the rest of the season. If he stays fit, he's another one of those players that will just start every single game. If you were going without Haaland because you wanted to take a bit of a risk, you want to climb up the ranks, differential, whatever it might be, then I guess you just stick to that and go without him. On Fabian Schär, he's another player like Ederson that got a bit of an injury, played on till halftime, then came off. Eddie Howe said he felt a bit of tightness in his hamstring. I think he went on to say that at one point it looked like he pulled it, but that hadn't happened. So hopefully Schär will be fine. He is someone that always seems to have a few of these knocks, but actually his minutes this year have been great. So I wouldn't panic just yet. There is a good chance that he will play in 36. And if that doesn't happen, you might still get him back for the double game week. So I wouldn't make any rash decisions there, because if you've got three other defenders you can play in 36, happy days. Save him for 37 and get another update. Van Heck, who some of you might have got for your bench boost on wildcard in 35 in particular, maybe even back in wildcard 30 and stuff like that, has got a muscular injury, unsure when he's going to be back. We're just going to have to wait and see what De Zerbi says. The good thing is, De Zerbi's actually pretty open about injuries. So if he gets asked, I'm sure he will give a time frame around him. So again, don't panic on that. If you need to sell him for someone in and around that same price, the options are limited in defence. You're probably going to Harry Maguire. Palace away this week in a double of Arsenal and Newcastle at home. It's not great, but his minutes should be good. He's got a bit of goal threat, and he's not too much more expensive. Anyone else, you're probably going up a bit more in price, so it depends how much money you've got to spend. Keep an eye on Richarlison. Maybe ignore everyone else from the Spurs attack who isn't Son. Like, Son got good minutes, didn't get a huge amount of chances against Arsenal, but did get the penalty. That's why we like him as an option. Like, Brennan Johnson didn't start. Werner went off. Kulusevski I just don't rate highly as an FPL option. He's a good player, but never really translates to many FPL points. Maddison, I was a little bit gutted I didn't go with. Came off in the 63rd minute. That is not great. Didn't play well for the game. That's what people have been saying that watched the whole match. I was out. I've only seen the highlights, of which there weren't many from James Maddison. So I think Richarlison's one to keep an eye on, just because if he plays that number 9 position, he has got great goal threat. But I think I would need to see him start and get good minutes against both Chelsea and Liverpool to have any interest in going for him. Is Vardiol now the best Man City defender? Possibly. I said this on the stream yesterday. It's just a constant headache talking about Man City minutes. I think Vardiol and Kyle Walker are probably the two that get the most minutes from now until until the end of the season. But I also said that about Ruben Dias like a week or two ago, and now he's been missing games as well. I think he was just ill, so it's a bit unlucky, but I just really don't know. Vardiol, maybe the most attacking of the lot at this point. 2 goals in the Premier League over the last kind of 3 to 4 game weeks. I guess it's him, and his price is quite nice. I mean, when I talked about Ruben Dias, I also had Vardiol on the list as kind of the next best option. So I guess with everything that's happening with Dias at the moment, it is just Vardiol. But it'll change next week, and Kyle Walker will be back to being the best option. But I think for his price, Vardiol is nice. You just get him knowing there is a chance he gets benched at some point. Or Ake could play left back instead of him. You just don't know, but he probably is the best option. Isak minutes looking great, even with Wilson back. So for anyone that was worried about Isak, I just wouldn't be. Are they always going to play together? Maybe not, right? Wilson could come on for Isak over the next couple of matches. You just don't know. But Eddie Howe has kind of hinted that we might see the two of them together a little bit. I think when Wilson's on the pitch, it makes Isak a slightly worse option. But Isak is way more likely to start. And I think with Burnley away, double game week, and then Brentford away last game week, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to double check that it is Brentford, because I've said that about Gordon now. Yeah, Brentford away. If you want single game week players, especially defenders, instead of going for your likes of Harry Maguire, whoever it might be, Everton look great. Luton away, Sheffield United at home. So Luton away in 36, Sheffield United at home in 37. Not a bad bench boost. It is Arsenal away last day of the season, and they are safe now, so I wouldn't expect many points from that game. But for the next 2, they're good. And obviously, Arsenal just continue to absolutely smash it. Bournemouth at home, Man United away, Everton at home. Who would be shocked if they outscored double game week players over those 3 weeks? Not me. Would I bring them in and panic? No. I would definitely still keep your double game weekers for 37. But obviously, Arsenal defenders, despite conceding twice to Spurs, still look like really good picks. And then just Ain't Nuri picked up a knock. It doesn't seem to be that bad, but we're going to have to wait and see. He seems to always be picking up problems over the last few weeks. He does have a nice single game week in 37, but I think at this stage he's probably not someone worth bringing in. I'd probably look elsewhere, and if you've got him, just wait and see what Gary O'Neill says ahead of the weekend. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Some of the stuff, obviously, I've mentioned in those notes, we will cover in more detail over the videos rest of the week. There's plenty of time for that. I'll be back for transfer tips tomorrow, game week preview Wednesday, team selection Thursday, etc., etc. Rate 5 stars if you listen on podcast, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.